Hey guys, Maverick here, ready for another episode of Steinsgate 0. So, last episode ended on a kind of a vague, weird ending-ish cliffhanger, right? Where it seemed like the series was going to end already, even though we all know that it's not. At the very least, though, it seems to be maybe a sort of ending towards the first core of this anime series, or anime season, as it originally aired. Now, I do know that this series has, I believe, 22 or 23 episodes to it, so that would be about in the halfway mark, and where anime is usually divided into Core 1 and Core 2, right? Although, it's kind of weird to see an 11 episode series and a 22 or 23 episodes in total series as well, but that's beyond the point. So we were left with a lot of different clues and hints as to the different situations, like who the actual people are, who the who the antagonists were actually, and so on and so forth, but we weren't actually left with any clues as to how the series was going to progress on, which means that really it can go anywhere from here. Now, my thinking is that it's probably going to be going through Kagari, right? Because Maho has left and she's back in the States already, and only Kagari is left here, who still has some shady connections in regards to her entire backstory and in regards to who is trying to actually take advantage of her, right? Because remember, we already saw Kagari as a point of contention even before we learned of Kurisu's laptop, right? So that's my prediction going in. Let's just see how it moves from here. All right, let's begin in 3, 2, 1, play. Hey, Kagari. Okay, is this like a flashback? Which means this is in the future, right? Mm-hmm. Treatment. Okay. Hmm. So was this before the war? Seems like it. Well, actually, considering the background and all, maybe during the war. Actually, I kind of forgot. Did they say that they picked up Kagari during the war or something? Now I'm just looking at the background. It seems to be in ruins, so uh, this should be during the war. Mm-hmm. Oh, there's still a lot of tall buildings here. Okay, I have no idea what to make of that scene. Alright. Let me skip this real quick. I'll check to see if there's any new stuff here. But if not, I'll see you guys after the opening. Alright, back, and I don't see anything changing. Mm-hmm. Mm. So no more attacks on her? Date.com. Oh, is it where to take your date? Okay, never mind. I thought it was a dating website. I mean, technically, it's still a dating website, just not that kind of dating website. Oh, it's the same song. You know, I still can't make up my mind whether she looks like Karisu or not. Like, I know, there's... Like I said before, I still think it's an interesting thought experiment as to whether or not Okabe would have changed his mind if Mayuri was going to die, like, say for instance, 10 years from now, like say sometime in 2020. Or 2019, right? Whether or not he would change his decision. Huh. So she wasn't? Hmm. So she actually did that of her own free will? That's... I'm not sure I buy into that, but okay. Hmm. Hmm. あ、date? I'd say a date. Considering that, considering Dara was looking up places. Are we gonna get a Ferris? No Ferris? Hmm? But did Suzuha learn it from, yeah, future Mayuri? Ah, there we go. Big sis. No, it's Dara's date. I guarantee it. It's Dara's date with Yuki. Oh, no, wait, it's not? Dang it. Never mind. It's an eating contest. Dang it! I heard it from Mayuri. Ah, Yuki. Alright. Only after Mom died. And this angle, she looks quite like Karisu. Yep. She's on a date! Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's fate. Come on, why'd you guys have to go wreck their date? Oh well, they'll eventually get together. Okay. I guess that's how she got the wounds on her hand. Oh? "20 years older." That's... Wait, who? What? Is she? Huh? Black dark history. But if he sang it for Mayuri... What? Cemetery? Aww. All this time? She really loved her grandma. Ah, it's the Magic Flute. Why is this suddenly turning into a horror series? Okay, I think they dodged it. Why does she always have such a huge reaction to the music? Hmm? Just go with the flow. Okay, I think I need to mute this for a while because of the... Okay. So they actually changed the ending song. I think there's still some more after the ending song as well. So since there's no actual scenes or video here, let me just quickly skip to the end of this. Alright, so that was basically the song that they were saying within the episode, and it's actually sang by Mayuri and Kagari, their voice actors anyways. So, anyways, there's a little bit more after the ending, so let's begin in 3, 2, 1, play. This song. Huh? What? I mean, that's Okabes, right? But, what? What in the... What the world? Alrighty, so in stark contrast to the last episode where things remained relatively uneventful all the way to the very end, in this one, first of all, we had this nice duet between Mayuri and Kagari, their voice actors. I believe it's called, the song is called The Song Played from the Stars, or something similar to that. At least that's, I believe, what the Japanese is. I haven't really looked at the lyrics yet. Maybe it's important, maybe it's not, but whatever, right? If it is, I'm sure one of you guys will tell me, and then I'll go look it up. And then we got that shocker at the very end, right? Where suddenly we realize, wow, the entire reason why Okabes knows of this song is because Kagari taught it to him. And bring this into sort of like this paradoxical loop, right? Which I'll get on in just a second. But actually, when I was looking at that scene, the first thought that I had in mind was I suddenly remembered, oh, wait. As much as I like the Steins Gate movie, it's actually not canon, right? So this is actually what happened. But anyways, that's beside the point. So let's talk a little bit about this paradoxical situation here, right? This is what I believe is called a bootstrap paradox, where, you know, things happen which leads to other things happening, which leads to the original thing happening at the same time. It forms into sort of like this closed loop in of itself, right? Which theoretically it's not supposed to happen, because who was the first one, right? Did the chicken come before the egg? Similar to that kind of situation. And I'm sure that most of you guys who have been watching my series for quite a while now are probably thinking, oh, Maverick's probably going to talk about this subject a lot, right? This particular point. The funny thing is, though, that's actually not the case. Now, don't get me wrong. I still have my, my problems with how this series as a whole treats time travel, right? I believe that there's actually, for me, there's actually two big things that this series does not explain, which I've talked about in length in my previous episodes and the previous Steinsgate series as well. Just to give a quick overview again. Number one would be the fact that due to there only being one timeline active at any single time, even though infinite possibilities exist, they aren't there, right? You only have one timeline, and everything retroactively rewrites itself to form this new timeline, whichever one that we are currently in right now. And due to this series having this type of interpretation, the original series ending was... No, there's no reason for it to be that convoluted, right? Because the alpha world line, beta world line, and the Steinsgate world line or whatever, they cannot simultaneously exist at the same time. Once Okabe reaches Steinsgate timeline, that is it. Everything before that retroactively writes itself so that he can get to this Steinsgate timeline. It's the timeline is set, right? Alpha timeline, beta timeline, those don't exist anymore. Right, so it's that's my biggest problem with the original series, and probably the biggest problem with the series as a whole. It's not strictly a paradox per se, because you can actually still sufficiently explain everything, but I'm saying that there's no need for there to be such a convoluted ending where Okabe is replaying the same thing back and forth, right? But anyways, that's beside the point right now. I'm not here to re-explain that theory. And the second problem that I have is something that I think I mentioned in the last episode or like episode prior or something like that, which is that given that the infinite amount of time in the future that there is, there has to be someone in the future who also discovers time travel in some sort of way, right? And if they could all go back to the past, well, we would never have a stable timeline. Everybody would be changing back and forth all the time, and that simply doesn't work, right? And these all stem from the same problem I have with the series, which is that they're choosing to use an interpretation of time travel, which I feel like is very limited and causes so many unnecessary problems. If they would have simply went with the multi-world interpretation, where multiple universes, multiple timelines exist simultaneously, and then you can jump back and forth between all of them, that would make things a lot easier. Now, back to this specific paradox, right? Even though it is a paradox at first glance, due to the way that, this series has actually tried to explain itself, it's actually not. And actually neither of these types of interpretations would have a problem with this. Both the multi-world interpretation and the specific interpretation that this series is going for, right? With multi-world interpretation, really, anything goes, right? Because you're jumping between different worlds, you can always have an outside factor leap into this world and then change the course of this specific timeline that you land in, right? So having this type of situation where someone in the future, or dare I say another timeline, comes and then changes things and makes it into a sort of a recursive pattern, that can totally exist, right? So there's no problem there. Within the interpretation that this series is going for, right, where they actually rewrite everything to make it fit into a stable timeline or a stable situation, this can also happen. Think of it like sort of like shuffling a deck of cards, right? And so shuffling it into a certain way where, say for instance, whatever way you shuffle, and suddenly somewhere in the middle there exists this chain of events 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So because every time that you change timeline within this series, you rewrite the entire history and the entire future as well based on this new timeline. You change everything. As long as it doesn't contradict itself, it can happen, right? That's what I'm saying about this particular type of interpretation, right? So what can happen here is that, okay, maybe this is not the way that things were before, and then by changing the timeline, changing again, you eventually land onto a timeline where this sort of closed loop happens. And as long as it's stable, then it can remain that way, right? There doesn't, even though this is sort of like a did the chicken exist before the egg or did the egg exist before the chicken kind of situation, with this type of interpretation, it doesn't matter. They can both exist simultaneously at the same time. So to me, this was actually not that hard of a paradox at all. And I'm sure that some of you guys were probably expecting me to rant or talk a little bit more about this. Sorry to disappoint you guys. I'm sure that some people like to hear me complain about this kind of things. But no, actually to me, this one, surprisingly, was not that much of a paradox at all. Perhaps more importantly, I would like to talk a little bit more about Kagari here, right? Because I can get... Like, I got what they were saying, what Suzuha is saying here, right? And the whole explanation of, oh, she's actually acting this way because she doesn't want the timelines to change because otherwise she wouldn't meet Mayuri anymore. Like, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. But the thing is, I'm still not entirely convinced that that is her actual backstory, right? Because there's still lots of things that I feel are fishy about her. Like, for one, you know, why does she look so much like Kurisu? Right, and for two, like, we still have this really odd situation where when she hears the magic flute, she suddenly enters into this sort of trance, right? So what happens? Like, what happened there? Of course, we can probably also infer from the very end that she was captured shortly after she arrived in the original world by some sort of organization and probably being brainwashed or you know, being controlled in some way, which might have to do with the song of the magic flute as well, right? That's why she's always entranced when she hears that. But I'm thinking that even in the future, right? Like, one of my very earliest theories about her was that she's some sort of sleeper agent, some sort of sleeper biological weapon, if you will, that is primed to act when she is given specific triggers. And so far, I'm still holding on to this theory for now, even with Suzuha's explanation. Like, potentially it could be a mix of these two, but I don't see any particular reason to change my stance on this as of right now. Now, let's talk a little bit more about something that I am outraged about, right? Now, this was pretty much a big Mayuri-focused episode, right? And then, of course, I love the situation at the very end where, you know, even though she's like completely confused as to why someone bigger than her, or older than her actually, is calling her mom all of a sudden. And she's like, whatever, I'm just gonna go with it, right? That's just Mayuri's personality, just go with the flow. My biggest outrage, however, is that with so much Mayuri screen time now, how long has it been since we've had an actual Tuturu, right? Like, come on, I miss my Tuturu. Or I should say Tuturu, right? So that's the thing that I'm actually most outraged about for this episode right now. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe she's only going to get her Tuturu back after Okabe reverts back to his normal Chuni self. Maybe, possibly. But yeah, I miss her Tuturu, and I'm sad that I can't get it. But anyways, so, you know, this review turned out to be much faster than probably most of you were expecting, but like I said, to me, the paradox isn't actually that much of a paradox at all. So, anyways, that's episode 12 of Steins Gate 0. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.